What's up, everyone? My name is Trent. This is Rams Talk. Thank you for watching the latest edition. This is going to be the Rams 2020 undrafted free agent offense only edition. We're going to go over who they signed as an undrafted free agent and kind of do an analysis of whether or not certain guys will make the roster, although it is extremely early and hard to tell because most of these battles are won during the preseason and training camp, and we're going to see a lot of this unfold on Hard Knocks if there is a season. So here are some of the names as a primer to kind of introduce everyone out there to. So when you see Hard Knocks and you're seeing these position battles, and usually there's a lot of these guys are going to be walked into the personnel office and told that they didn't make it. So let's get to know these guys up front. Now, a lot of the research I did here was made possible by Jake and Downtown Rams, put together quite a bit of really good information on this. So tip the cap to Jake, and also this one is for Borotnik. He's been asking for a UDFA list for a long time, and so here you go. This one is for you and for everyone. Now, to be honest with you, previous years I didn't pay too much attention to the UDFAs just because, you get to know someone and you really start investing, and then they're gone. They're out of your life, and it's tough. It's hard to keep track of the 53 guys on the roster. And this year, there's going to be 55. So 2 more spots. Keep that in mind going into this year. Now, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. It's all Rams stuff. This is the place to be. Go look around on YouTube. This is the Rams channel on YouTube. So please subscribe. If you've already subscribed and you're a longtime subscriber, thank you for being a part of the community. I really appreciate it. You can also find me on Twitter at Real LA Rams Talk, and on Instagram, LA Rams Talk. And also, I'm going to have something coming up pretty soon. Hopefully, this all works out. It's going to be Twitch. It's going to be basically a bunch of all the leading YouTube creators for all the respective teams, including some fantasy football stuff and mock draft stuff on Twitch and all the different channels. So it's a good place to go if you want to see things about other teams, and I'll be speaking to my equivalent for the opposing team for that week, so it should be really good stuff. So stay tuned on that. Now, on the offensive side of the ball, the Rams signed 10 offensive players, okay? And the roster as a whole, or the group of UDFAs as a whole, was ranked 8th by Thor Nystrom of Roto World. So they did a pretty good job. Also, Thor Nystrom is a really awesome name. They have on their roster now, the expanded huge roster, about 40, close to 40 undrafted free agents. That obviously will get pared down significantly as we approach the season. Last year in 2019, at the beginning of the year, about 31% of all players in the NFL were undrafted free agents. So about 1/3 of every team were comprised of undrafted free agents. So, they come and go. And the tricky thing about this is that the Rams have guys on their roster from last year that were undrafted free agents of other teams that were then cut and then the Rams picked up. So a lot of these UDFAs that are on the Rams roster now, before they signed these new guys, were UDFAs that the Rams had signed in 2019, and also guys that they just picked. They just got that were waived by other teams. And I'll go over a couple of those guys because it kind of factors into this. Now, notable UDFAs on the Rams roster right now: Malcolm Brown, Johnny Munt, Morgan Fox, Troy Reeder, Natrez Patrick, Troy Hill, Darius Williams, Dante Deon. So those are guys that have gotten legitimate snaps in the NFL for the Rams. So, this is, and let's not forget Corey Littleton, the great Corey Littleton. He's probably the UDFA star. That guy came from the bottom, and now he's here, and he signed a big contract. So, he's kind of like, the poster on the wall, like one day as a UDFA, I'll be like Corey Littleton. So, also when I go over through this list, there's about 3 tiers of guys. And not tiers in terms of talent, but just like buckets of categories that they fall into. So you have the small school guys that typically, so this year there were, I don't know the number, but fewer small school guys drafted than in previous years. And this is due to COVID. So because of COVID, people couldn't travel, they couldn't meet. The small school guys, like sometimes you couldn't go see them in person. So, well, granted that was after COVID, but you know what I mean? Like it kind of limited the flexibility. So a lot of these big teams are teams focused on big school players that they had a lot of tape on, maybe relationships with with coaches from these power conferences and major schools. So kind of a different deal this year with the small school players. Then you had guys that just kind of, for whatever reason, weren't drafted. So like Cohl, Cabral, Xavier Jones, Trishton Jackson, those are like three guys that the Rams signed on the offensive side, for even Bryce Perkins, that like could very well have been drafted. So they weren't these kind of random guys that the Rams just kind of have, scouted out, but maybe weren't popular with other teams. Like these are the guys that like should have been drafted. Then you have a couple guys that just were buried for a long time in the schools that they originally signed with. And then after a couple of years, they transfer. Then they have 1, maybe 2 years at another school to put up the numbers. So they're kind of hindered by the lack of production. Not production because they weren't good, but just maybe they were just buried. Like one came from Michigan State, one came from Penn State, had a lot of talent on those rosters. So I'll get into those guys. So you kind of have the guys that were buried, then you have the guys that were good and for whatever reason weren't drafted. Then you have kids from small schools that really, the small schools didn't get a lot of time to shine in the draft this year for obvious reasons. So let's start with quarterbacks. Now this is very interesting. So we have Jared Goff, no doubt. But then the next three guys on the roster, all UDFAs. John Wolford was in 2018. So right now, John Wolford is the presumptive backup. 2018, he was drafted by the Jets. Then they waived him. Then he went to the Arizona Hotshots and the AAF. Okay, when he was so he was out of Wake Forest. So then in the AAF, he won Player of the Week twice. AAF went away. Then he was signed by the Rams in April of 2019. So basically, right around the draft of last year. So he's kind of like lumped into that group. So he was with the Rams in camp last year. John Wolford, we all know him. So he's kind of the incumbent because you always want to think that a guy, if you have three guys that are kind of the same style, same stats, that maybe the guy that was in the system for a year has the leg up. So John Wolford to me will be on the roster moving forward. It's really the two guys after that the Rams just picked up now as UDFAs. Bryce Perkins is going to be the guy that I think makes the roster. Now which one is not like the other? It's Bryce Perkins. He's a dual threat QB out of Virginia. Now he started 2 years there. He was a transfer from Arizona State, but he started the last 2 years at Arizona. He's 6'2", 215, runs a 4.5, 240, and he produced. He produced in the ACC. So he for the last 2 years, he scored 67 touchdowns through the air and on the ground. 47 in the air, 20 on the ground. Now it's crazy when I looked at the college senior year completion percentage between John Wolford at Wake, Bryce Perkins at Virginia, and the next guy I'll talk about, Josh Love from San Jose State. Perkins had the highest completion percentage. Now he didn't have the highest yard per attempt. I think it's 7.1. The next guy I'll talk about, Josh Love, was 8.2, so about a full yard. But he was accurate. Right, he had 12 touchdowns. So last year, just to give you full context, he threw for 3,530 yards, 22 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, and then he rushed for 769 yards and 11 touchdowns. So he's accurate. He can run. He can make plays with his feet. And his comp is Taysom Hill. But he's a better thrower. He's a better athlete. He's a better Taysom Hill, if you want to go there. I think he makes the Rams roster. I think he's the third quarterback. And he's a guy who could come in, let's just say, God help us, Jared Goff goes down. You bring in Bryce Perkins, and he brings a completely different element to the game. Very elusive, great athlete. Defenses will have to adjust for that. He could be like Taysom Hill in the sense that he could be an offensive weapon in some sort of sub package. So, obviously he's not going to start. No guarantee he'll make the roster, but I think he's the third quarterback on the roster. Now, if the Rams go for 4 quarterbacks, that'll be crazy. I don't think it'll happen, even with the expanded 55-man roster. But I like Bryce Perkins. You look at his highlights, and dude was really, he was key, and he produced. So, Bryce Perkins, that's a name to watch. The other QB they got in Josh Love out of San Jose State. He's a traditional pocket passer, same height and weight pretty much as Perkins, but not the speed. I think a 4.7 40, who cares? He was the Mountain West Offensive Player of the Year. Really good deep ball accuracy. You watch the highlights of him. He's dropping it in there. What trumps like elite coverage? Elite ball placement. You put it somewhere where the defender can't get it, hey. So like I mentioned, 8.2 yards per attempt, so he was throwing the ball downfield a lot. So I'm not sure if that meshes with Sean McVay's kind of expanded West Coast system, but he does throw a very nice deep ball. He threw 3,923 yards last year, 22 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. So he's bubble, he's fringe. I like Perkins over him, but if the Rams want to just go with Goff, Wolford, Love, all pocket passers, then there you go. Anyways, now you know about the QB position. Moving to running backs. Okay, so I like John Kelly as a person. I remember on Hard Knocks it was Behind the Grind, I think. He was drafted. Like John Kelly, but I never really thought he was going to be, like, let's just say at the time Todd Gurley, Malcolm Brown went down. Would you feel comfortable with John Kelly as the lead back? I never really felt that way. Not even like a change of pace. A good depth piece maybe to sprinkle in, but now that we have Cam Akers and Malcolm Brown and Darrell Henderson, I don't really know. He'd be a depth piece, but I like Xavier Jones out of SMU. That guy balled out last year. Completely balled out. 5'10", 208 pounds, 4.59 40. His senior year last year, he rushed for 1,276 yards, 5.2 yards per carry, and 23 touchdowns. Had 2 more touchdowns through the air, 25 total. Great production. He has great vision. Yards after contact. You watch his tape, he's breaking tackles. He's like one of those guys that he's running one side of the field, sees that it breaks down, then reverses direction, goes all the way back around the field. Not a burner, but people weren't catching up to him. And he's pretty decent at pass blocking. So he's one of the guys that kind of for some bizarre reason was not drafted. Probably because he doesn't have the elite measurables, but he was, you watch his tape and the guy can flat out ball. So right now we have Bryce Perkins and I have Xavier Jones as 2 guys so far that would have the best chance of making the team. Granted, I've only gone over 3 guys, but there you go. Xavier Jones. Him versus John Kelly and the next guy I'm going to mention, James Gilbert out of Kansas State. That's going to be the running back, 4th spot for the running back position that we're going to see play. Now, James Gilbert, KSU, 5'8", 197, runs the same as Xavier Jones, 4.59. So he's a little bit smaller, a little bit lighter, but he doesn't have that small guy speed. He has the same speed as Xavier Jones. And I think that's kind of the knock. If he was running a 4.4 or a sub 4, then we might be talking about something here. His comp is Benny Cunningham. Benny Cunningham was serviceable. He was okay, but a couple years in, then he was gone. So like I said, small, no breakaway speed, and his pass blocking is a little iffy. So I feel that it's going to be an uphill battle for James Gilbert. I think it's really going to be between Xavier Jones and John Kelly for the 4th spot. Now, as we go into the wide receivers, this was the position with the most free agents, UDFAs, that the Rams had signed. And I want to talk about two guys the Rams already have. So I'm going to talk about Greg Dortch and Nsimba Webster. Now, everyone knows Nsimba Webster. He was an undrafted free agent that the Rams picked up last year out of Eastern Washington, the same place as Cooper Kupp and Samson Ebukam. And he's 5'10", 180 with a 4.49 40. His senior year, 84 catches, 1,300 yards, 11 TDs. And as you go through, as I list these down, like almost everyone had 11 TDs in their like last year of college. So he's on the roster last year. I think everyone generally liked Nsimba Webster. Didn't get much of a chance because of the crowded receiver position. Same thing this year, crowded receiver position. I don't see them keeping more than 6 max. So right now we have Kupp, we have Woods, we have Jefferson, we have J. Ray. So it's pretty much like 2 open spots. Who's it going to be? So Nsimba Webster could have that leg up simply because he was on the roster last year. He knows the playbook. So he does have that year of development in the Rams system. So Nsimba Webster could be the fifth guy. The other guy, Greg Dortch, he was an undrafted free agent in last year by the Jets, and then they waived him. He went to Carolina. Carolina waived him. Then the Rams picked him up in December. So back when they were still playing football, they picked up a guy named Greg Dortch. Now, Greg Dortch, he was an All-American punt returner from Wake Forest. So that's one thing that we haven't really talked about. Now, he's 5'8", 170, 4.49 40. But we haven't talked about, like, who does anyone know who the Rams punt returner is going to be? Right? So that's kind of an open position right there. And I feel the way you're going to make the roster, you guys all know this, is special teams. And like, can you do 2 things? So guys that are just receivers, unless you're an established guy, the guys that are just receivers are going to have a harder time making the roster compared to guys that can do a couple different things. So if you can play special teams, if you can be a receiver, if you can return punts, then that's the versatility that will get you on the roster. So Greg Dortch, he's small, 5'8", but he does bring that punt returning pedigree to the Rams. So, it's a toss-up between those 2 guys right there in terms of guys that have been on the Rams roster already. Now, going to the fresh crop of UDFA receivers, the guy I like the most is Trishton Jackson. 6'1", 197, a 4.5. So he runs about the same as Dortch and Webster. Now, Trishton Jackson falls into that category of guys that were buried on depth charts and then transferred. So he was on Michigan State. And when he was on Michigan State, he was buried on the depth chart there, and he was playing special teams. So that might help him out. So didn't really get much PT, sat out a junior year, sat out a year, then his junior year transfers to Syracuse, then immediately after getting tons of reps, and he gets 66 catches, over 1,000 yards, and 11 touchdowns. And he was their top receiver at Syracuse last year. He has the same measurables, height, speed, size, speed, all of this stuff as Brandon Ayuk and CeeDee Lamb. So if you just looked at their measurable data, he blends in with those guys. So he's similar with how fast he runs, how big he is, his weight, and everything like that. Now why I like him is that he was a guy that was considered to be they thought he would be drafted. So he falls into a guy that was buried. He also falls into a guy that could have been drafted very easily, day 3 draft pick. Great yards after carry. He needs to fill out a little bit. He has a slight frame, but he's tall. Yards after carry. He produced in the 1 year he actually really played. And that's the one thing that he has that the other receivers here don't have. He's the only guy that's at least 6 feet tall. So they all run about the same, but if you see him on tape compared to the other guys, he looks different. So Trishton Jackson is kind of I wouldn't be surprised if he and Dortch were the 5th and 6th guys that made the cut. Now going down, the next guy that was also buried on the depth chart is Brandon Polk. Brandon Polk comes from James Madison. James Madison is in the Colonial Athletic Association, right? Everyone knows the CAA. So he was on Penn State, and he was buried with all those receivers that they had. Godwin, I mean, like, you go back, it's like he couldn't crack it. And no, that's no knock on him. So he transfers to James Madison, and last year, 74 catches, 1,100 yards, 11 TDs. Now he's 5'9", 175, but he runs a 4.28 40. So just right there, he'd be the fastest guy in the Rams roster. That's appealing. So, I mean, if he can chip in with special teams or returning kicks or punts, that's Brandon Polk. Just because of the speed, that's a guy to watch. Okay. So he brings something that's different from everyone else with the speed. Jackson brings something with the different because of his height. Then you go down to Aesop Winston out of Washington State. His junior year, I believe, was when Gardner Minshew was there. So Gardner Minshew was throwing to him. And then last year, he also had a really good season where he put up 85 catches for 970 yards and 11 TDs. And he can go over the middle. That's his. He can move the chains. He comes up big in big moments, kind of like a Robert Woods-esque. 5'11", 192, runs a 4.42. So he's a bit faster than everyone on this list except for Brandon Polk. Then Ernest Edwards out of Maine, 5'10", 175, 4.41. Maine, same school that produced Jamil Demby. That's right. Also Maine in the CAA. So right now the Rams are just cornering the market on the Colonial Athletic Association. I'm guessing that's what the two other A's stand for. His physical comp is Percy Harvin, Lavernius Coles. He ran 2 kick returns back in the same game against Colgate, not the toothpaste, but another school in the CAA. He's great at 50-50 balls, and yeah, he's in the record books as 2 kickoff returns in the same game. So it'll be interesting, but a small school. It's kind of uphill climb. Same with J.J. Koski out of Cal Poly, local school, 6'1", 186, 4.4, 40. Not great production. 42 catches, 868 yards with 8 TDs. He has good hands and is a deep threat, but really kind of out of everyone, he has an uphill battle based on his production and being at an extremely small school that I didn't even know had a football team. And I'm from California. So anyways, those are the guys. So wrapping up the wide receivers. So you have 2 guys that are already on the roster, Dortch and Webster. Then you have Trishton Jackson, Brandon Polk, Aesop Winston, Ernest Edwards, and J.J. Koski. So I feel 2 of those guys are going to make the roster. My bet right now, early bet, Dortch and Jackson. But if you want speed, you can go Polk. If you want someone who knows the playbook as well, you go Webster. All right. So the last guy that they signed as an undrafted free agent, offensive lineman Cohl Cabral. 6'5", 300 pounds out of Arizona State. Now, if you're on the West Coast, you've probably seen this guy play in the Pac-12. He was the NFL or NFL.com when they were ranking all the prospects for the draft. He was the 8th ranked center. Tyler Biadasz was the 6th ranked center. So he's not far behind the guy that was drafted, I don't know what, in the 3rd, 4th round. So, maybe 5th round. I can't remember where Biadasz was drafted. And Biadasz was a guy everyone was like, a lot of people are thinking the Rams should take. So Cohl Cabral not far behind him. Now, what Cabral does is he brings versatility. His sophomore year, he played the full season at left tackle. Okay, left tackle. Then his junior and senior years, not only was he nominated team captain by his team, but he started center the last 2 years of his college career. So positional versatility, which is what Aaron Cromer, offensive line coach and running game coordinator, Aaron Cromer loves, is positional versatility, left tackle and center. And that's huge for the Rams because you have guys Noteboom and you have Allen coming off injuries. So you just don't know how they're going to react or how they're going to how their recovery is coming along. Now, he has great football IQ and he's great at pass blocking, but his run blocking has a bit to be desired. So that's something that, if he's stashed on the practice squad, that he can I feel could be coached up in, hopefully could be coached up in. Now, there's so many other guys that I didn't even mention, like Shelton, the other offensive lineman, was an undrafted free agent last year. Lots of other undrafted free agents from previous seasons, from other teams that the Rams picked up along the way. But I feel out of this crop, on the offensive side of the ball, especially with rosters being expanded to 55, I feel like Bryce Perkins, Xavier Jones, Trishton Jackson, and Cohl Cabral. I think of those 4 guys, I can safely say on the offensive side of the ball will be on the Rams roster, active roster, or on the practice squad next year. Granted, there's been zero competition to kind of weed these guys out, but just based on the caliber of player they were in the pros and what the Rams need and maybe what they're looking for, those are the profiles that fit. Now, I'm going to get back to the lab and do some research on the defensive players, and I think another 10 or 12 guys on the defensive side, and we'll see how that goes there. But I hope you guys liked it. I hope you found it informative. These are all names that we'll have on the top of our heads when we're watching Hard Knocks, like I said, if there's a season. So hit me up. Let me know if you have any questions. We really just going down the rabbit hole since we don't have any football for a couple of months. So that's it. Let me know what you think. Thank you for watching. And as always, go Rams.